Welcome to the Tech Titan Webinar Wednesday series with Intermedia. I want to thank everybody for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule to attend the webinar today. My name is Kim Withrow. I'm the manager of the sales engineering team at Intermedia. Today we're going to be covering the new UI for email archiving, as well as reviewing some of the expanded features that are now available. But before we get started, I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me okay. So if you can hear me, if you could just give me a thumbs up or a smiley emoji using that emoji button on the top center of the screen. All right, awesome, good, thank you, appreciate that. All right, so just as a way of introduction, we have Intermedia's Webinar Wednesday is a really popular series of webinars that takes place every Wednesday. So it's broken up into 3 different tracks that you're actually seeing on the screen here right now. The first track is called the Business Builder track, and that's designed to help you as a partner grow your business and ultimately, obviously, your success with Intermedia. And then we also have the Tech Titan track, which today's webinar is a part of. And that's designed to give you live demos and deep technical dives into features that can bring real value to you and your customers. So both of these tracks are on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. and they alternate Wednesdays. And then the last track is called the CCAS training track. And that actually takes place every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. So between these 3 tracks, you actually have the opportunity to attend 2 webinars every Wednesday. Now, if you're interested in seeing what the upcoming webinars are, or if you want to register for upcoming webinars, you can just go to the HTTPS link of the intermediawebinars.com, and that will allow you to register for the upcoming webinars. All right, and then I just want to elicit some feedback from folks. We created this email address, techtitan@intermedia.net, and really looking to make sure that we are providing content that is valuable to you as a partner. So if you have topic suggestions or things that you would like to get either demos on or deep dive trainings on, please send your suggestions over to me. I promise I'll reply to that email, and I'll do the best that I can to work in all of the requests as soon as possible. So we're going to be taking about 30 minutes of your time today, hopefully. About 15 to 20 minutes will be on the presentation piece of it, and then about 10 or 15 minutes for the Q&A. Now, in our last webinar, we had a bunch of Q&A questions, and so we actually went over by about 11 minutes. And we'll probably do that again today if we end up with a lot of questions. However, I understand if you can't stay on for the entire time and you need to drop off after 30 minutes. So if you do have questions, please use the built-in question functionality at the top center of your screen. There's a little blue question mark square there that you can click on. It opens up a little dialog box. You can type your question in there, and that sends it over to me as a moderator, and it provides it in a format that I'm then able to share it with all the webinar participants when we're doing the Q&A section at the end of our session here. And then briefly, I just want to talk about our Unite certification process. So if you're already Unite certified, great, but if you're not, there's a little plug to complete the certification steps. It actually doesn't take very long. It only takes a couple of hours to complete, and it gives you everything that you need to start selling Unite, which is our Unified Communication as a Service product. It gives you everything you need to start selling that right away. So, excuse me. To do that, you would just log into your partner portal and then click on Intermedia University, and then click on that orange Get Certified button. And then once you're certified, please take advantage of our NFR accounts. So NFR stands for Not for Resale. And this gives you, as a partner, the ability to sign up for services for yourself, for your own company, either free or at a steep discount. So if you don't currently have an NFR account, you can actually call that 888 number that's on the screen right now. And if you want to, you can actually download this little PowerPoint introduction that I'm going through right now via the group attendee chat. You'll see the link to that, and you'll have that number for reference. You can also just contact your partner account manager directly if you know who he or she is. And then I also just wanted to introduce you to myself and Mike Vitale, who's going to be the primary presenter for today. So as I mentioned before, I manage the sales engineering team at Intermedia. I can't believe this, but I'm actually coming up on my 10-year anniversary at Intermedia. I started off as a level 2 support engineer, and I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved up into support management and did that for many, many years over on the onboarding side. And then about 2 years ago or so, I moved over to manage the sales engineering team, and it's been just a wonderful move for me. I love managing this team of smart, enthusiastic, and engaged sales engineers. And then speaking of smart sales engineers, I'd also like to introduce you to Mr. Mike Vitale. So Mike has been a sales engineer here with Intermedia for just over 3 years. However, he's got 20 years of experience in the technology industry. So his career includes working experience with LAN and WAN networking, telephony, security, desktop productivity, and a whole bunch of different cloud services. So his focus today is on Intermedia security and application services, and that really builds on Mike's experience and his desire to help make communication easier and more accessible for everyone. If you've had the opportunity to work with the sales engineering team in any way in the past, then you likely may have encountered Mike's smooth and informative demos. He works with partners daily to support their selling from a technical perspective, primarily on our archiving, encryption, and Office 365 products. So with that, Mike, I'll go ahead and turn off the screen share and let you run with things.
Great, thank you, Kim. And thanks for everybody for joining today. What I'm going to cover, you'll see here on the screen. You're here to look at the email archiving, whether or not you have used it before or you're new to it. I think I'll show you something that'll be of interest. But more so than clicking through and showing you what is possible, technically, what we're looking at here is really why it is that people are using email archiving. And as we get into it, and I'm showing that to you, there's really two sides. And when we're looking at archiving, I have in what I'm doing as a sales engineer, a lot of conversations with people about archiving, and that probably with many of you on the phone, you have those conversations. It can be all over the board. It can be everything from what we offer, which is compliant archiving, where it's long-term stored, in a repository where it can't be deleted, to items on a hard drive, on a thumb drive. They're in somebody's, they're all over the place. And the benefits of what we're looking at is that with our archiving solution, it provides really twofold. For the administrator, you can search across all mailboxes in one area where inbound and outbound email is going to be kept. Where if you're working with a customer and they have legacy, archives, again, it could be in PST or various formats, that can be ingested into the email archiving engine, and now an administrator or different roles that I'm going to show you in a moment can access that and retain it and very quickly retrieve email. That's really the point. I speak to enough people who have to do searches of email, and they're finding things again on different types of drives and media, and it's a very lengthy process. And if of course, if there's litigation involved, that can be very expensive. And so a benefit for the admin is being able to search quickly and retrieve. And when I'm talking about that, tens of thousands of emails, even for medium-sized companies, can be pretty easy. If we're looking at hundreds of thousands, certainly it can do that and retrieve that in just a few seconds. And in terms of being able to keep email indefinitely, yes, you can. And you can also set retention periods. The other part of this is the end user component as well. And the end user, really, if you have end users who have emails, any of us who have it, and it may be very difficult to search for, across thousands of emails, and you're looking for something specifically, rather than taking the time in Outlook, which sometimes can be very, less reliable and difficult to recover. The email compliant archive gives users the ability to search their own. It's really self-service, and working together, it works. So when you're setting up archiving, and I'll show you a few of these slides, but I'm really going to get into the service itself. But the first part, and this is a question that comes up quite a bit, is when you're first configuring archiving for an organization, there's really a couple of roles. The first is the user role that I have here, which everyone would have access to. So again, user may search his or her own mailbox, not across the organization like an administrator can, but his or her own inbox. Then you may also enable different types of roles that are beyond or the administrator on the account. And there's different reasons that you want to do it. So here I've circled compliance officer. There's a search administrator. There are different roles that you may apply, including a user role. And some of the reasons that you want to do that as an administrator, you of course have access to the control panel or host pilot, all of the settings that are in the service. A compliance officer, a search administrator, they too can search across all mailboxes. But what they are limited to is what is in email archiving. What they can't do, for instance, is go and make changes to other services that are in control panel or host pilot, and then disturb some of the other services. So they can use and do searches as well. There are some other pieces here too, as well as a reviewer or exporter, different roles that you can assign people, and you can see what's here on the screen. And I'm going to touch on this as we go through it. That last role again is that end user, and again, this allows them to do their own personal searches. If somebody, and a good example of this is someone has lost, let's say, a document from a few years ago, maybe the mailbox was deleted entirely, and they're no longer, or that person, if they need to find mail items, it may not be in the inbox itself, but it could be available certainly in the archive. The same thing holds true is if a person leaves and the email mailbox was deleted, the email that was sent, so long as archiving was enabled, is still in the archive. So that could be searchable by the administrator in this case. So it adds a lot of functionality. What I will mention is when you get into the service itself is there's a great help section. If you look for features available by role, you'll see a table like this. There's some other explanations, but this will give you an idea as you're configuring it, certainly what is possible. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to show you, really, we're going to spend the balance of our time. I want to show you and spend time looking at the actual service itself to show you what is now new and available within that. So go ahead and share my screen. Right. And I see there are also, and I just want to address it as I'm setting this up, there are questions coming in, and we will be trying to answer those certainly at the end. So for those of you who, again, may have seen this in the past or who are new to it now, this is the interface that you have available. There are a series of searches. Now, of course, when you first set this up, this wouldn't be there, but the search is right here available. I'm going to get into what you can manage. You as an administrator can look at exports or holds. And when I say administrator, in this case, I've signed in as a compliance officer. So as a compliance officer, I have the ability, just like an administrator, is to be able to search across all of the mailboxes and conduct my searches. What I'm unable to do, again, is go into other host pilot accounts and make modifications to that. So simply what I can do is, if I want to, or as I'm doing this, is I want to create a new search. I have a couple of options to me. A simple search. We've all done searches before, so fairly simple to do. Looking for keywords, date ranges. You can look at attachments. All these that are going to be pretty familiar to us. You can search by predefined size of mailbox, and then we'll get into this a little bit in any type of active litigation if that applies. But this is a simple search. For you, what I would really recommend, and this is what I think most people will do, is create an advanced search. And what an advanced search really gives you benefits of is you now can create more complex searches. So an example of that is by simply adding criteria. It's taking what we're doing in a simple search and building on top of that. So if I'm looking for a keyword in the simple search, I can type in a keyword. In advanced search, I can look at different groups, subject, body, attachment, attachment type, all of that. And I can start to type, and then I can start adding ands or ors. So something to this effect. And as I'm saving this, okay, I can continue to build my criteria. And by criteria, I can look at to and from and certain types of attachments, for instance. Now, one thing I'll mention, certainly, there are other competing platforms. One of them is the Office 365 platform. You can, attachments comes up a fair amount. Now, we work with groups in the medical and healthcare and finance a fair amount. And while you can search for these different areas, and under the attachments areas, apologize, you can look at predetermined areas like presentations or spreadsheets, documents. There's about 58 types in Office 365. With this service, there's 600 different types. So while the common ones, it makes sense, there are industries where it wouldn't be uncommon, and those can be included. Inbound and outbound email that has a different type of attachment type, you're, of course, spreading out that net and capturing more of what is possible. And again, you can exclude or include different kind of content depending on what you need. And again, we can continue to build up our list. And a list may also include keywords. And a keyword list in some that I've run could be financial terms. Then this is one that I created. Now, the way that you can create this and get to some of the others, and I'll come back to this. So if I move up to the gear, okay. As an administrator, you have options to policies, reports, and lists. And I'll hit these two in a minute, or I'll discuss those. In the list that I was just looking at, this is where you could create a keyword list. So in financial terms, what I created based on a customer request were to search for the words guaranteed and secure. You could come up obviously with your own list. They could be at certain domains. We've had requests for searching for like more common like Gmail or Outlook or Yahoo accounts. All of that can be done. This is where you would save that list, and then when you are building out your searches, go back to advanced search, that's where they'll appear. And it's simply just tagging that and adding that to your group. And you can even take this to yet another level if I wanted to add groups. So I could add a criteria group with all of that, with, let's say, keywords and people, and then add separate criteria. So advanced search really will get far more granular for what you need. Once that search is done, or you've created your list and you've created your criteria, and just simply for the sake of time, I've done this beforehand, is now you'll run a report, and those reports or those searches that you've run will be available here. Now, in terms of how much data or how long, how much data you want to retain or a business wants to retain can also be set by you. I'm going to go back again to the gear. I saw this before. Here's the policies area. In the policies area, as a administrator, so as an account administrator, I can change the default. Now, the default on this, and this is a question about some other services, is how long or how much email can you retain? Well, this is indefinite. The default is indefinite. Now, I've worked with a number of organizations where they only want to keep a few years, or excuse me, even 3 months has become more common for a variety of reasons. If you check this box, then you could change that policy. So know that that's available. But the bigger question is, can you keep everything indefinitely? Yes, you may. And I think I saw a question come in from that. So now that I've run with these type of reports, I'll show you how I got to there. If I click on the details tab, what I'm able to do is name the search, again, provide a description, but I can get very granular on what that search is. And I was showing you how we could build that a little bit earlier. There is a new feature, and for the finance markets, of being able to pull a set of emails, and in this case, there's 470, and being able to randomize the results. So for certain industries, that's a request. And now I can pick my percentage that I need to randomize. I've seen 2%, 5%. Again, it depends on the set. And when I save this, search, what will happen, if I go back to here, is now I can see that the content has been randomized, and there are requests for this as it's being done, sometimes monthly and certainly quarterly, to be able to randomize results either on a full set or certainly for a person or group of people. So that can be done. And again, if I run a set of reports, then I have what you're going to be more familiar with is the ability to now really get a lot more granular and looking at content. Right now, I can switch between a table view, and where I am right now, I'm in a panel view. And the panel view, what that does is it provides me as an administrator or a search person, again, the compliance officer in this case, the ability to look through individual emails and get an understanding of what I'm looking for. In terms of filtering, I can go and filter my results. So what we were looking at before, now by attachments, holds, if you need to filter it further. 470 is fairly reasonable. When you're pulling tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of emails, as I've done before with this particular database, being able to filter and reduce that size is important. For this service, you can get far more granular with the services. You can also, of course, tag items, and that's very important as you're going through. And if you need to review items, you can see the tag item will be there. If I need to put items on legal hold and different types of hold, if there's an active litigation, you can see some of these tags that are applied. Or if you had one that you've created based on a keyword search. All of that can be done. Now, as I mentioned before, if I go back here to the gear, and there's a policies area, click on management, we're keeping everything. Legal holds, still could be applied, but if you're keeping everything, there's less of a reason to put items on legal hold because you have everything. If there is a retention period, and let's say there's 10 years of information here initially as you import it, and there's or 7 years, we'll say, and then there's a 7-year retention policy. Anything past that time would be deleted and removed, and it can't be recovered. If you put an item on legal hold, it will stay past the retention period, and that's why it's so important to do. So a case could take, a case based on a search could take 2 or 3 years to close. Well, now those emails will be kept in the archive. So that's one of the reasons that you'd want to do that. And again, if I look at this information, and I'm going to actually go back to this one here, I'm going to run this. I can look at this view, and I can also look at a table view. And from a table view, I can, again, apply certain content. I can look for any attachments. Then I can also export my results if that's something I want to do. So by exporting, I can, I'll pick some of these items here. And what I'm able to do is I can export these results. Now, with we do get questions about how does this compare with like a 365 service. First of all, we can export now, which was 15 before. It's now been increased to 30,000 items. The export that we do with something like 365, you can export in a PST. With this service, you can also not only do PST, but also something EML and PDF. And there's different reasons that you'd want to do that. EML, maybe Outlook isn't available, or there's other types of services that you're going to, that an attorney or legal team or whoever's reviewing this needs to look at it in that type of output. I've also had requests for PDF. We just want to see the data. Maybe it's a reasonably sized set of data. I had one that was 60. 60 items. We could put them in PDF and someone could consume it that way. That's what this is offered, or that's what the system will offer. So then we would run the report, and I could export these items, and then simply put, here are the exported items, and then I could get them to in these type of reports. So by simply downloading them, you can export them. All of this is to increase, again, the speed in which you can complete this. The last part that I do want to mention, and this comes up a lot in our discussions, is the ability to run other types of reports, and specifically a audit report. So I've run a couple for this group here, and audit reports are available. And what specifically those look like on the output, I'll show it to you this way. And this type of a report will show certainly the time, the date, and what occurred within the archive itself. Roles were changed. I mean, you can see what's here on the screen. Aliases changed, and it depends on the criteria that you create. But there's many different types of reports. Here's another one, or audits that we're running searches, and you can search. You can determine what that criteria is, and simply put, if you're doing that, this is where it would be. So that's from the admin side. The other piece that I want to show quickly is the end user itself. As I mentioned, you can provide this for the end user, and that end user can search his or her own mailbox. And it's changed a little, if those of you have seen before. The export now, it's going to be in a familiar table like this. I can look at it in plain text or HTML if that applies. And now what the end user is able to do is he or she may download that to their either directly to their device, or they could send it someplace to another colleague if that's needed, and you would have it. It allows for fast retrieval. And really, if they're looking something like a contract or something, an attachment, you can look simply for emails with attachments, apply that, it'll find those attachments, and you can retrieve that and recover it. So know that even if that message, again, isn't in their primary mailbox, it may very well be in the archive when archiving is applied. So given the time, I want to leave it at that. I know there's a number of questions that have come in, so I'd like to go ahead and start to work through those. Kim, I think we should probably answer some of those.
Great. Thanks, Mike. That was great. If you just end your screen share, then I can start displaying the questions. And then if you need to do it, if you need to share your screen again, we can of course do that. So there were some questions that came in through the chat that I responded to, but we did have a couple that have come in here. So this is from Thomas Freeman. He says, "This is my first time in the Intermedia webinar tool. If I was running a webinar like this, how would I see the questions entered?" So that's a great question. Actually, Mike, I'll just kind of run with this one really fast. I'm going to share my screen here with you really quickly. Oh, not letting me do it, actually. So, what would happen is that actually you would have some different control. Actually, Mike, can you share your screen so we can show it to him? I'm not sure why mine isn't happening right
now. Let's see if I can do that. We'll just explain that piece on how we can show that.
This is interesting behavior. I haven't seen it before. So, essentially what happens is that you have some special controls up at the top center of your screen that give you the ability to do a number of things that are related to moderating or running a webinar. So one of the things is reviewing the questions and being able to display them on the screen like I was a second ago. You also have the ability to create and run polls, and you can do some other functionality within there, stop and start the recording, things like that. I just want to mention to everybody that if you're at all interested in our webinar product, or even our AnyMeeting product, which is just our online meeting, kind of similar to Zoom, we are giving everyone a free webinar license and a free AnyMeeting license if you want to do that. Until the end of this year. So I would encourage you to, sign up for that, and you can play around with the webinar tool and get an idea of what it can do. Okay, so we have another question here from RP. So is there any way to narrow down a search? I'm looking for any appointment paperwork with AM wins in my email after 5/31/2018. I put in keyword appointment because I'm looking for appointment contract paperwork, and it came back with 46,508 emails. There can't be that many emails with the word appointment in it. So, Mike, what do you think will be RP's best thing to do?
So sometimes the word appointment appears. There's a couple things you could do. You could filter for the body of the email or maybe the subject. Appointment can appear as a plugin or sometimes with Outlook or some other mail email system. It can be the same thing as schedule or another commonly used word. I've seen that. Once you get that, what you could do is filter out the results based on um, uh, you could keep the same date, but what you could do is further filter the results once they come back.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and you
All
can
right,
rerun
great.
it again. So
Oh,
yeah, no, that's fine. I was looking at another question.
oh, okay.
Um,
So if we had the previous archiving solution, are we automatically converted to this one? Is the old data, retention settings, et cetera, converted over to the new one?
yes. So the previous service that we used, you're getting the benefits now of the enhancements. So it should, at this point, all the accounts should have been updated or will be with this new interface. But I believe that's already been done. And yes, so now, for instance, you're going from being able to export 15,000 items to 30. You go from 3.2 gigs now to 20 gigs. You have the ability to do deeper and more complete search. You have the ability now to be able to add the randomization features. So those are just some of them. But yes, you will have the new interface.
Okay, great. Let's see. And I think we've got a couple of questions in here that just got added. So how can we tell if a sub-account archiving service has not been updated to the new interface?
Sure. I think the easiest way you could see, if you have access to that, you could open up email archiving, and the display that I was just showing you that you'll see in the attachment with the slides that we've included, that's the new interface is there. The previous one, I'll say, I mean, it was more of an orangey color, and
Yeah.
we've since moved to this new interface. It's I'll say a more modern interface was the
Yeah.
direction we're going for.
So if you go into the attendee chat, you'll see there's a couple of links in there, and you can download. I think go up to the very top, you can download some things. And if you download the archiving new interface overview PowerPoint, that'll give you some of the screenshots that'll show you the new interface, and you'll be able to tell pretty quickly if you've got the new interface if you compare it to those screenshots versus the old, like Mike said, sort of orange-looking dated interface. And so, okay, are you still using Sonian with the new UI, or is it a completely new provider?
Sure. So yes, Sonian's specifically Barracuda, who purchased Sonian. Yes, that's a service that we're using. It's on the back end of this.
Great. Okay, great. And then one came in over the chat. It says, not sure if this is beyond the scope of this webinar, but what are the advantages of this over Microsoft Exchange Online Archive?
Yeah, that's a good one. And that comes up in many of the conversations. So, there's quite a few. So first of all, some of the differences is, when you're doing keyword searches, if somebody is doing that in their own mailbox, you could search 100 stats on about 100 mailboxes with Office 365, depending on the plan, but with Exchange Online, it's going to be fewer with Office 365. With ours, it's really going to be unlimited. As I mentioned, the types of emails, or excuse me, the types of attachments that you can get in emails. So we work across many different industries, and what Office 365 allows is you can search across maybe 58, and it's a service that's always evolving, but the last number was about 58 types, and a lot of those are Microsoft or variations of Microsoft documents types. So Excel, XLS, Excel, or PowerPoint or PowerPoint Viewer. There's different ways that can be done. That's 58. What I'm talking about is 600 different types. So if you're working with construction, healthcare, medical, different industries where they have, less common types of files that they may need to search for, that's where this will be good. Also, that exporting with Office 365, you may do with .pst files. With this service, as I mentioned, PDF and EMLs. The big one, though, for most people, it's immutable storage. In other words, it can't be deleted. Once it's written, it's there. For Office 365, now there are options depending on the plan, But as a default, no, that email can be either removed, unless illegal hold is applied. It can be altered by the end user. It could be deleted. Now, there are some stopgaps in that, but as a as a service, the idea is with our email archiving service, it once it's in there, it's in there. It can't be removed with the exception of the GDPR rules and it is a long process if a customer has questions about that. It is not just, the administrator can go in and delete emails. That's a huge difference, and that's a question we have. And then also the audits. I was showing a bit about that. With ours, all of those audits and that audit log will stay in the service. After 365, audits are available for about a year, and then they'll roll off. So if you're looking, we get questions about audits all the time, and that's in there. Those are some of the differences. I'm trying to think of things that were, probably help as you're combating that. The big one, though, again, is immutable or keep always storage, if that's the way it's set up.
Yeah, and Mike, would it be a true statement to say that, if somebody has compliance requirements that, that this solution is compliant out of the box, whereas the Microsoft one, it can be compliant, but there are some settings that need to be changed and things that need to be done to make it that way, and it lacks some of the features that we have. Would that be the correct statement?
They're correct, and there are some services, or there's ways that you can look at that, is while you may be able to configure it, when a company gets a service up and running, particularly now with people being home and working in different locations, really they want to make sure the email is archived. And if someone forgets a setting or they don't have it or they haven't configured it properly, that could be fairly disastrous later on down the line. What this is doing is it's taking the onus off of, first of all, the end user to remember to archive, and 365 should do that automatically, but I'm saying more broadly with other services, it will keep it. It's inbound and outbound. You can search for those attachments. If something is, what I want to say, if something is using our services, if it's passes through and it's encrypted, it won't be encrypted in the archive. If you're using like our policy-based encryption, for instance, things like that, you can go back and search for that. So, really important points. And if there are more of those questions, we can tackle them or talk with certainly your team members here at Intermedia, and we can we can take some one-offs as well.
All right, great. Well, so that was actually the last question that we had. Thank you, everybody, for participating. If I could just ask you all to reply to the poll here, just on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the best, did you find the content of today's webinar valuable? As I mentioned when I was talking about the techtitan@intermedia.net email address, we really want to make sure that the content that we're providing in these webinars is valuable to you and that it is something that you want to see and that you feel like this was time that was well used. So I appreciate the responses here. Go ahead and close the poll in about 30 seconds or so. So, it looks like we had another question added as well. So we'll take a look at that really fast if you have time, Mike.
I do.
Okay, so we have one here. It says, if not encrypted in archive, how is it HIPAA compliant?
Sure, the email is still encrypted, and it depends on the service itself. But in the what you're doing is you're capturing the that archived email, and you want to be able to report on it. It's not that we're removing. It's not that the encryption is being removed. It's a copy of that email is available. The downside is if you encrypt an email and it hits your archive, any type of archive, beforehand, and it resides in that archive, you can't use it as part of a discovery request. I mean, you can see that it's there. With our service, it's separate, and when the email is sent, the inbound, outbound email is captured first, and then it will pass through, and I'm speaking specifically like of our policy-based encryption service, it'll pass through, and then based on the policy that you create, the email would be archived. And HIPAA compliant, yeah, it certainly matches or works with that.